The first quarter has ended, so let's review every single move I made during the quarter. First, we're going to look at companies that I doubled down on, including Kava, Transmedics, Axon, and Sea Limited. Let's go one by one. Kava, for those of you that might be unfamiliar, this is like the Mediterranean version of Chipotle Mexican Grill. It's a stock I already owned, but I added to it in March. Why? Because the company, if they hit their target of 1,000 stores by the end of 2030, I think the growth rate that's implied in the stock price today is actually very fair. Next, let's move to Axon, the company behind police body cameras, stun guns, and most importantly, the software that runs on them. I added it in late January, early February. Why? Because the company came out and said that they expect revenue to be growing about 30% per year over the next 3 years. This continues to be what I believe is one of the most anti-fragile companies around. Fourth is Transmedics, the company behind the machines and the transportation systems that allows for more hearts, lungs, and livers, and hopefully soon kidneys to be used during transplants. When the company updated their guidance late last year for 20 to 30,000 transplants by the end of 2030, I ran a total addressable market valuation on this, and I think this could be an $11 to $12 billion company by the end of 2030. Today, it's below $4 billion. And fourth is Sea Limited, the company that's focused on Southeast Asia, has a gaming component, e-commerce, and payment. I added in January because I believe its valuation is very cheap. GMV growth has been very impressive. The company is really being held down right now by two things. One, are oil prices affecting Southeast Asia, and two is competition from TikTok Shop. I'll be watching and waiting because it's already such a big position for me to see when to add next. Other moves I made during the quarter include new positions I've started in Palantir, Cloudflare. Yes, I actually sold out of Cloudflare in 2025 at over $200 per share, and Hims and Hers. So let's go through this one by one. First is Palantir. I love the business momentum here. I mean, the growth, especially in U.S. commercial, is incredibly impressive. So I added in mid-February. Cloudflare is one that, as I said, I sold out of, but I re-entered it as I started learning more and more about Claude Cowork and how Agentic AI was increasing traffic on the internet. And I believe that's adding a lot of optionality and that Cloudflare could be the gatekeeper of this technology. So I added to it twice during the quarter. And Hims and Hers was a new position that overall was more of a lottery ticket. I added just before the crash that occurred after the Super Bowl and just after it kind of reaccelerated on the announcement of the agreement with Novo Nordisk. This is still a very, very small position, but the idea here is that if Novo Nordisk is willing to make a deal like that, then there is definitely some leverage when it comes to Hims and Hers. So those are three new positions. There's some other moves in here that had to do a lot with valuation. The first is trimming Rocket Lab. The second is adding to Airbnb. In trimming Rocket Lab, I trimmed twice, once in January when the stock was almost at $100 per share, and again in March when it was above $70 per share. The idea there just being that it was a very, very large position for me, and I thought that its valuation was getting a little bit ahead of itself, but I still own a big chunk of that. And finally, Airbnb is one that I added to just because of the yields, both the free cash flow yield and the potential shareholder yield moving forward that this captures. But the big story of the quarter has to do with the pivots that I had to make on the fly. And I've already talked about this a little bit with Cloudflare that have to do with Agentic AI, because that is really a game-changing technology. As Anthropic came out with kind of a new different vertical every week, it seemed like it was reshaping things. And the more and more I dug into this, the more and more I started to group things into companies that would survive and potentially even thrive, like Cloudflare, and those that were really going to be challenged. So there's two different buckets of this. The first one right here is just some rebalancing because of vulnerability versus resistance to this age of agentic AI. So I completely sold out of Salesforce and Adobe because of this, while adding to CrowdStrike and Viva. So Salesforce I sold out of in mid-February for about a 27% loss. Adobe, the same thing. The immediate threat is less actually with Adobe, but as these tools get better and better and better and better, every week, I think that the long-term thesis for Adobe and Salesforce is challenged. At the same time, I added to CrowdStrike I did sell out of it at over $500 per share in 2025, and I added to it based on both valuation and the potential for more cybersecurity threats in the age of agentic AI being plausible. And I also added to Viva, which is basically the cloud service for the pharmaceutical industry. Still debating on what I think about that based on the position size. And my last two moves were definitely the biggest in terms of the dollar amount changing hands. Now, before I tell you those two, I have been tracking my portfolio for over 11 years. You can see my results in the green. Look, this was a tough quarter, a very tough quarter, but I'm showing you all the moves that I made. And remember, there's a lot of companies that I own that are in my portfolio that I didn't make any moves in during this quarter. If you'd like to see what those are, and this market-beating portfolios, you can see beating the NASDAQ Composite in the yellow, S&P 500 in the red, then I encourage you to join Stock Investing Mentor, my program for individual investors. The way that this works is it comes in three parts. Part one is weekly live 1-hour training sessions, direct access to me and the team that runs it, to high-level analysis where every week on Thursday at noon Eastern, it's recorded, you'll get one nugget to help you become a better investor. 2, full real-time access to my portfolio along with detailed explanations of any move I make. And number 3, 24/7 access to a private online investing community. If that interests you, click the top link below and you can get a limited time 10% off discount on a year-long membership. So what are those final two big moves? Well, first was Shopify. Shopify is a stock that I was trimming in late 2025 and sold out of completely in mid-January for a 95% gain. The real reason was just pure valuation discipline. However, shortly thereafter, I added back into it and re-upped and started a new position. Why? As you can see, I sold high and I was buying back lower because I believe that Shopify is really on the cutting edge of agentic AI commerce. And it's literally writing the languages that these programs are going to use to do shopping using AI. And I believe, especially because the company could have even better margins because of this, that it was something that I wanted to own. And flip side here, the Agentic AI Pivot was ServiceNow. I originally bought in early February before I completely understood or even saw all of the releases from Anthropic's Cowork. As I started to research more, I realized that this agentic threat was real. While it might not be able to orchestrate agents yet, I do believe that as these models improve and increase in their proliferation, it will be an existential threat to ServiceNow. Luckily, I was able to get out of that with very little damage to my own portfolio, 5% loss. Now, like I said, lots of stocks that I own that I didn't make any moves in at all, but overall, those are the 15 moves that I executed during the quarter. 4 core strategies, and the one defining shift for the quarter was the release of agentic AI. Of course, moving forward, keeping an eye on oil and the situation in the Middle East will be the thing that we know of now that's on our radar. Don't forget to hit subscribe to check back in at the end of the second quarter to see what moves I make. Until then, Brian